Ooh, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how you doing? How's your mama? How's your family? We got the man, the myth, the legend. He dropped MMA Che. The fuck going on my green screen, man? Damn. See what I'm saying? All right. We got MMA Che. Who truly has the best jiu-jitsu in MMA? I think the only correct answer is Charles Oliveira or Islam Makhachev. I'm coming into this video with an open mind. This guy, MMA Che, he loves Charles Oliveira. It's his favorite fighter. It's my second favorite fighter of all time. And I don't think he's going to be biased. He's not the biased type. But I'm sure it's going to be discussed between Umar or Islam Makhachev. And it's weird. I'm thinking Charles Oliveira has the better BJJ. But it's like, okay, if I need somebody, life on the line, I need somebody to go get a submission. Who do I want? Who do I trust more? I'm trusting Islam Makhachev, right? So I don't know. But Islam Makhachev is the better wrestler. He has better control, better pressure. But but Charles, he'll sub you off your back. He'll sub you standing. He'll sub you from the top. So make sure to see what MMA Che has to say. Share this to somebody. I know they'll enjoy it just like you will. Like, comment, subscribe. Help out that algorithm, why don't you? 2025, we on the way. Let's do it.
You know, when I was a very small child, I recall my father asking me if Islam Makhachev.
You know what I gotta do for MMA Che videos? I gotta turn his shit up. MMA Che audio be so fucked, yo. I gotta turn this down. That's how we gonna do it. Alright, let's lock in.
Has better jiu-jitsu than Charles Oliveira.
Sorry,
and
hold
at the time, has better. I recall my father asking me if Islam Makhachev has better jiu-jitsu than Charles Oliveira. And at the time, I scoffed at such a notion. At the time, I was deeply offended, and I hadn't spoken to my father in many, many years since then. But now that I've grown and matured through life and the world has gone around dozens of times, I think that, honestly, it is a more interesting question than you would think. I think jiu-jitsu as a whole is a bit of an interesting phenomenon. I think it doesn't really exist while at the same time being everything. I think that it is paradoxical in nature, and I think that it is something that people don't really understand anymore. Of course, as I'm sure many of you know at this point,
What this guy talking about, brother?
come from an extensive Aikido background. It is what I have dedicated my life to. In fact, I actually just got home yesterday from a 10-day Aikido seminar tour. Again, that is what my life consists of. That is the main priority, is teaching and expanding the art form of Aikido. But honestly, I can sit here now and tell all of you truthfully, Jiu-jitsu is better than Aikido. Jiu-jitsu is better than wrestling. Jiu-jitsu is better than judo. And the reason for that is
because it's better than wrestling.
to define specifically what jiu-jitsu is. And I think when you take its core elements, it's very, very broad. And it being very broad is what helps it so much.
Bro, this nigga
and
is yapping.
Confusion may arise when discussing this topic is the fact that there is a very old school traditional style of jiu-jitsu that still sort of exists today.
That shit
I
sucks.
think what we saw Crone Gracie
I knew he was
attempt
about to say that
against
shit.
Bryce
That ain't
Mitchell
jiu-jitsu
is
no more.
essentially that. The way Crone approached that fight was how pure jiu-jitsu athletes approached fights in the year 1990. But since then, the sport has grown and evolved a lot. And frankly, it has become extremely broad in terms of how you would define it. So broad, in fact, that I think there are only two core principles that is jiu-jitsu. No matter how you want to spin it, no matter how you want to put it, there are two aspects of this grappling art
Lay it on me.
that frankly is the grappling art. And number one is securing a dominant position on the ground in which your opponent cannot effectively attack you. And number two is submissions. That's it. If you are trying to accomplish those two things, you are doing jiu-jitsu. So let's say, for example, you're a very strong wrestler. You take your opponent down, but you cannot get past their full guard. You get stuck in this position. You cannot advance any further. Well, you are giving your opponent
30 feet ass. Feet dirty as a bitch.
You cannot advance any further. Well, you are giving your opponent the opportunity to either throw elbows off of their back, for example, throw up submissions, or just control your body with their legs. You are giving your opponent the opportunity to attack you with a variety of things. But if you're able to pass their guard and then mount them, well, now the only thing they can effectively do is try to throw punches off of their back, which is not very effective. Or if you take their back, well, now the only thing they can do is maybe throw punches behind themselves. When you just look at traditional jiu-jitsu scoring, there is a reason why you get points for achieving advantageous positions. You get 3 points for passing the guard to side control. You get 4 points for mount. You get 4 points for taking the back. They are rewarding you for getting to a position in which you are limiting your opponent's offense. And this exact same concept can get translated to MMA. And the reason why it is such an overpowered grappling art is because it essentially encompasses all forms of grappling. You can use skills from wrestling to achieve this. You can use skills from judo. You can use skills from sambo. It all fits under this big umbrella.
So nowadays, whenever we say his BJJ so good, we really just means he has really good submissions.
This concept has been properly defined.
Or control, I guess.
Who in the UFC does this better than anybody else? Who is the best at achieving advantageous positions, and who is the best at finding submissions? Well, I've got a few names, all right? And in no particular order, these names we're going to look at is Brian Ortega, Diego Lopez, Khamzat Chimaev, Gilbert Burns, Charles Oliveira, and Islam Makhachev. That's 6 people. That is
Khamzat's... It's very, very interesting because he's chain wrestling. He's he's shooting a double, getting that defending, switch it to a single. Now he's on your back, drop you to a knee. I'm working a body lock. I'm wrestling. Now that I wrestled you, now I'm using my jiu-jitsu to take the back. And once he has a submission in, he's going to squeeze the ever-loving shit out of it until he breaks your fucking jaw or you tap. Very, very interesting.
6 people we're going to look at. Starting off, you got Brian Ortega, Diego Lopez. I would say neither of them fit the criteria as well as anybody else on the list. I would say both of them follow a slightly more old school style. Not Chrome Gracie at all. I mean, not even close. But again, positionally, they're not great. I would say they are much more submission oriented. Brian Ortega in particular is the kind of guy that is going to jump on submissions with an insanely high proficiency in being able to finish them. He can go from a completely neutral position to all of a sudden being very deep on a submission extremely quickly. But in terms of securing his opponents in positions where they cannot attack him, doesn't really do that. Diego Lopez, the exact same thing. Lopez should have beaten Movsar Evloev when he fought him on short notice. Just honestly, rounds 1 and 3, in my opinion, clearly went to Diego. He threatened Movsar about 1,000 times more than Movsar threatened him in return. But again, in terms of securing dominant positions, I don't think either of them do this particularly well. They're pretty lopsided in the area of only being submission oriented.
They actually can get beat up.
Now, these next two, I think it's extremely close. You can kind of go back and forth with it. But when you're looking at Gilbert Burns and Khamzat Chimaev, it's very, very interesting. Because when they fought, Gilbert Burns overall bested Khamzat in terms of this criteria. Khamzat tried to be very grappling heavy against Gilbert Burns. He was clearly way bigger, way stronger, was dragging Gilbert around the octagon at times. But when he would try to secure a dominant position, Gilbert, he would Granby roll, he would go to his back, he would throw a knee shield in, and then he would start hammer fisting Khamzat off of the back. Khamzat just could not attack him from this position. Gilbert had all of the offense here. It doesn't matter that he's on his back. Being on your back is not inherently bad. The only time you don't want to be on your back is if you don't want a particular guy on top of you. But when Oliveira fought Kevin Lee, he was on his back the entirety of round 1. And no matter what Daniel Cormier will try to tell you, all 3 judges gave that round to Charles because he put an absolute clinic on off of his back. And from this position, Gilbert is winning, and that is why Khamzat just stood up and didn't want to engage with him on the ground. Even when he dropped Gilbert Burns with a jab, tried to follow it up onto the ground, Gilbert hooks his arm, tries to throw up an armbar, Khamzat pulls out, and then does not try to go to the ground again. And Khamzat himself stated,
I was too respectful for his grappling. That's why I didn't work on the ground. When I touch him or first time take him, he's like, he's not that strong in wrestling. But when I took him down, he tried to took armbar something. And I was like, yeah, no, I don't like that shit. I'm gonna go up and.
I don't like that shit.
I mean, look, I don't know. Maybe case closed, but it's difficult to ignore what Khamzat did to Robert Whitaker. I mean, Khamzat absolutely grapple fucked him. Took him down, stayed behind him, was constantly threatening the back takes.
That was some of the best jiu-jitsu. That was probably the best jiu-jitsu performance I've ever seen in my life.
Any sort of
I mean it. I'm dead serious.
Robert Whitaker, who in the past we've seen be a phenomenal grappler. The only thing I think holding Khamzat back here is, of course, the final submission was a little fluky. Of course, it's not normal for someone to start panic tapping with a choke over the face.
Right. He subbed him, but I get what you're saying.
Whitaker had a pre-existing injury with his teeth. He was very open about that. So I think if that submission he hit on Whitaker was more legitimate, he got right under the chin, I think there's no question. But I think you can go back and forth with it a little bit. Of course, though, there is also the Kamaru Usman
but then Kamaru survived.
And
Kamaru's not really known for having the greatest jiu-jitsu. So.
Close.
Well, he's very controlling. But as far as submissions,
to finishing this choke. If Usman hadn't have slammed him face first on the ground, he was done here. I don't think that Gilbert was ever capable of doing this to Kamaru Usman. Though, of course, Khamzat did have a big size advantage here. Of course, Usman took the fight on short notice. So, again, it is kind of close. I have heard the argument that Gilbert Burns doesn't deserve to be on this list because he doesn't go for submissions. I do think that he is more positionally oriented than he is submission oriented. But, he has 9 professional wins by submission on his MMA record. So I don't think that is exactly accurate. And I think as we stand right this second, I would say that
I think he's declining.
See a bit more from Khamzat to be certain. But what he did to Robert Whitaker, the positional advantages he was able to get, I think does probably put him ahead of Gilbert Burns as we stand right now. And now in contention for number 1, Islam Makhachev or Charles Oliveira? I think it is an interesting, nuanced question. Of course, on the surface, you would say that Oliveira has better submissions. Islam is better positionally. But I would say that, of course, Oliveira in his last fight, he put on an absolute positional clinic against Division 1 wrestler Michael Chandler. He was taking him down, taking his back. When he was on top, he was getting chest to chest, completely eliminating any offense Michael Chandler might have. When Islam and Charles fought, it was pretty back and forth in the pure grappling exchanges. When they were out in the open, Oliveira was undoubtedly getting the better of the grappling. He was the one throwing up attacks, forcing Islam to have to defend. When he tried to attack Islam's legs, Islam got up and then ran away. But when Islam would get Oliveira down into this
Islam
position,
was throwing him, tripping him,
pressed into the fence, he was clearly the one getting the better of the exchange. Oliveira's offense was extremely neutered from this position. Now, obviously, Islam subbed Oliveira. It did come from the fact, though, that he rocked Charles first. It didn't come out of a pure grappling exchange. But regardless, Islam does have good submissions. And frankly, with all of this being said, I think you do have to give it to Islam. I think the way he uses positional control in MMA is phenomenal. I think you look at the Dustin Poirier fight, he was having these amazing moments of grabbing a Kimura, using it to force Dustin to spin a specific way to purely take his back, throw the body triangle in. The back takes he was able to hit against, Volkanovski, who is just so phenomenal at getting back up to his feet. He's ridiculously hard to control. Not to mention the modified Darce he jumped on against Dustin in round 5.
Nuts.
Charles' submissions are better, but I think Islam just all around, when it comes to securing dominant positions that limit your opponent's offense and finding submissions, I think he's more well-rounded in that area, and I think, therefore, you do have to give him a sub.
Yeah, it's like I said at the beginning of the video, it's like, life on the line, I need somebody to go give me a sub. Who do I choose? To go finish a fight by submission, who do I choose? I truly choose Islam Makhachev. Even though Charles Oliveira is the more diverse grappler, has much better submissions off his back, standing, and on top, Islam might have better submissions. But Islam's top pressure and control.
Slight edge based on this criteria, and I think
y'all let me know in the comments who has the best BJJ. Is it Khamzat Chimaev? Are we tripping? Because like I said, Khamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whitaker, that's the best jiu-jitsu performance I've ever seen. I don't give a fuck if you squeeze his face so hard his fucking jaw exploded. I don't give a fuck about a pre-existing history. If that's the case, he's been dealing with that shit for that long. Why hasn't anybody else done that shit? Exactly. I don't want to hear that shit, man.
Makhachev, it's close. I think he has the best jiu-jitsu in the UFC. I think Oliveira second, Khamzat third, Gilbert Burns 4, Brian Ortega 5, and then Diego Lopez 6.
It's a good video. Way to test the mind. Way to keep you sharp. Way to make you think. I appreciate that. Share this to somebody. They'll enjoy it like you did. Like, comment, subscribe. Help out that algorithm. You ain't got to go home, but you got to get up out of here, man. Until next time. Yay.